But it doesn't help when you have betting agencies just throwing millions and millions of dollars at that vulnerable punter, or that punter that may not even be a punter, to try and lure them in. No doubt legislation needs to be put in place. And we saw some of that happen last year with no commentators, referring to odds, and no tickers down the bottom in live play. And the last thing I want is my child or any children to be judging who the best side is because they're a $1.40 favourite rather than because they have better players. And I think it's that ingrained now in the youth, and the betting agencies have done such a wonderful job at doing that, and I know my son does it. He knows that Collingwood are favourites on a Friday night because they're $1.63. Not because they have a great coach and they've got a great captain in Nick Maxwell and they've got great forwards in Travis Cloke and so forth, but because the bookies say they're favourites. And I think now that we're at that stage, it has gone too far. It needs to be pulled back in some way. I'm not sure how that would be, but it is dictating to us rather than the sport dictating to them.
Hey guys, we're just doing our debate on sports gambling and how it's deeply embedded to sport through television and radio broadcast, through advertorial segments from different betting agencies heavily featured. There are concerns that the prevalence of sports betting is subverting the values of sport. Is this a valid concern? I'll be voting for saying yes, and Conor will be voting for saying no, using figures, our own thoughts, and research we've done.
So the three main topics I'll be discussing today that in my point of view, that are gambling is benefiting the Australian economy, is the fact that it's revenue. That's not topic number one. Topic number two, it's increasing job employments for Australians. And number three, how I'm going to look at the fact that people say gambling is a first world problem and it's a considerably growing problem, but I'm going to show you stats today that why that is not the issue.
With mine, we talked about the negatives, so problem gambling figures, online gambling figures and their advertising, accessibility for online betting, and the values of sport and how it's affected by sports gambling. In reference to the AFL and their promotions.
I'll let you start off, Jake. You're first.
Alright, so I'll be first on about problem gambling and the figures that are involved in that. So in 2014 to 2015, the Victorian Gambling Foundation, according to their figures, found there was a 30% increase between 2014 and 2015. This is a big figure in terms of sports betting, because it's only become really a thing in the last probably 10 to 15 years in terms of people wanting to bet on sport. With that, it's taking away the value of the sport. So if you're saying you're going to an AFL game and you want to bet on the first goal kicker, you'll be looking at that player to kick the first goal rather than the team kicking the first goal. With that, I think it's a bad thing to have for the sport alone, because if you're wanting to support a team and you're worried about your bet or gambling on the sport, it reduces the actual awareness of what's going on around you, the game itself, the event, and the money that's being spent on sports gambling, which rose from 815 million to 921 million just in that year alone, which is a very big figure because that was taken 3 years ago. With that, the evolution of online gambling would have increased that figure by probably say 2 to 3 times, because nowadays the younger generation are all on their phone. It's easy to sign up to a company. With that, you're getting a good deal for your deposits. It's becoming a problem for the younger generation because of that accessibility problem.
So with your fact, you said it cost the government 815 million, correct? Well, the government gets there through gambling. They raised over $5.5 billion in just alone in 1 year, which is 10% of all state tax revenue. So if you take that into consideration, they've raised $5.5 billion. The Australian government has spent $33 billion on the education system. So if you take that $5.5 billion, how can you really say that it's cost $815 million? But there, you've just I've shown you stats that it's good for the Australian economy and it's helping us move forward, helping us improve our defences, helping us improve our education, etc., etc.
The problem is that's just from problem gambling alone. with that, you're not taking into consideration individual problems. In terms of, say, an average person, they're wanting to bet on sport, they're spending too much, like above their budget. They've got a young family.
Another thing on that, if you say that they're spending too much, the gambling industry, despite all the bright lights and the slogans and everything, they don't go to the consumer's house, pick their hand up and say, come spend money. At the end of the day, it's the consumer's option to either spend the money or don't spend the money. If they have a problem with addiction or a problem with money, or they can't feed their family or they can't pay the bills, it's sad, but that's their fault that they're spending money on gambling. It's not the gambling industry's fault that it's not our fault. It's their choice, their decision at the end of the day, and it's their choice.
Yeah, but I think with that though is the accessibility of online gambling. You can be anywhere, any place, and you can access that. I think that's completely wrong. In terms of people as well, like online gambling, the advertising, it's on all day, every day. Nearly just about every ad on a movie or a TV show will be either Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, CrownBet, all advertising their products to try and get someone, an average person, I'd say the younger generation, because that's their target audience at the moment, to sign up to their company, because they're showing these brilliant ideas of what they've got. For instance, Sportsbet are at the moment doing a same game multi advert, as 24 up you win advert. With these, they're addressing the benefits of signing up with them, but not the negatives.
But once again, the negatives. Obviously, if your business, if you own McDonald's for say, you're gonna advertise your company, yes, yeah. So why would you say, they're not saying eat McDonald's every day or gamble 24/7. It's a consumer, and here it says 70% of all Australians that have gambled in one way or another. So if you have 70% of our 24 million population that have gambled one way or another, only 5% of that 70% have actually become problem gamblers. So once again, it's not, in the large scheme of things, it's not a huge number that have had a really significant problem with this industry. And if at the end of the day, it's a business. The whole world revolves around money. If they're wanting to make their product available to their consumers, and they're being innovative by creating apps and creating these slogans and betting and easy access to betting, as you said, that's just an innovative way and another way to bring money in, which is their business at the end of the day. As I stated before, it's not their decision, it's not their choice to allow the consumer to come and bet with them. It's just them producing that and allowing them. So at the end of the day, I believe it's still on the consumer to either not bet or bet.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what you've sort of said there in terms of it's their choice. But at the same time, out of that 5%, how much of that 5% are contributing to the overall expenditure of problem gambling? Because although it seems like a little figure, those 5% could have had very major problems go wrong simply because of these products. That they're so accessible that you can't sleep at night because you're on your phone betting on live sport. It's that problem that affects everyday people. It's that accessibility problem. In terms of the advertising, I've noticed that Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, CrownBet, they're all everyday things.
It was the most epic game of AFL ever played. In a room by 4 blokes and a dog. Big hits, passion, and selling the candy. But no matter how much we'd all love to be those heroes, there comes a time to gather around the telly with your mates and back the real ones. And whichever team you back, bet better with Ladbrokes.
But a full-time job also is an everyday thing. In the gambling industry alone, 60,000 jobs were created through hotels and clubs all around Australia. And on top of that, 20,000 jobs in casinos. That's 80,000 jobs from the gambling industry alone that have been created for everyday Australians. They don't need higher education, they don't need to go to tertiary, they don't need to go to uni, they don't need to go to get a diploma in anything. It gives people access to jobs that don't have to do this or don't have the money to be able to do higher education or can't afford to get into a trade because they can't afford to live on apprentice wages. It allows them to basically just get a job, and that allows them to feed their family and put food on the table, pay their bills, etc. It's it's a growing issue, unemployment in Australia. In 2008 alone, we were the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had, at 4%. It's now, in 2018, 10 years later, we're at 5.6%, and it's grown over the last 2 years. So unemployment is a significant issue, and if this gambling industry increases and booms, as I said before, as its business, it's just going to create more jobs and create a greater revenue and be great for the Australian economy. That's what I really truly believe.
I think there's a problem with what you've just said in terms of employment, especially in casinos. With that, it's like poor people giving money to the rich, pretty much, because these people are owning the casinos, such as James Packer. They're owning a lot of money, but they're taking the money from people who go there who are struggling. And they can't afford to sort of lose that money. Yes, I understand they're going to these places when maybe they shouldn't be. Their budget's too low to be going there. But in terms of what they're doing, they're giving the money to the rich.
You say that, but once again, I can go back onto the figures that it's helping Australian economy boom. And at the end of the day, I'll say it one more time, that it's their decision to go. It's not the Australian gambling. It's not our industry where we say we'll hold your hand and bring you down to the casino. It's their choice. That's really all I have to say with that issue again.
But I think it is a major concern. Like with that, I think the major thing at the moment is sports gambling. In terms of broadcast and radio, you can't go 5 minutes without seeing an advert or hearing an advertisement on the radio. With this, I think it's a major problem for Australia alone, because in regards to reference to an AFL game, the values of sport. What do you think about that? What's your opinion on the value of sport in terms of gambling and non-gamblers?
So you're saying that a consumer that goes to an AFL game has to gamble. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Well, there you go. You've just proven the point again. We're not saying they have to come and gamble. They can come and enjoy the game, and as a side industry, they can bet on it to make it a little bit more competitive or a little bit more exciting or whatever they want to do. They can, but they don't have to gamble. That's just our side industry that has boomed lately because of our innovation and our technology. Yes, it's easy accessible for them, but once again, it's their choice.
But I think that is a valid concern in terms of getting people to bet on live sport through sports gambling. If you're going to an AFL game, I know most younger generation that go tend to bet on the sport, not overall the result of the game, but more so individual markets. Now, this is a problem with online betting, is that it's gaining more and more events, that it's creating more and more markets on every game to bet on. I believe this is a major problem. In terms of, say, Sportsbet same game multi, you're looking at 20 touches, 25 touches, 30 touches, anytime goal scorer, 2 goals or more, 3 goals or more. It is a problem because it's going away from that value of sport. You can't go to a game, if you've put a bet on it, you can't go to a game and watch that game and think, oh, that's not in the back of your head. It is.
But with any other business, we're not just going to do who wins or we're going to... So Jake, as you stated before, with all the... Is an AFL consumer going to a game and having the game not playing in the back of their mind where they're really heavily invested in the one player they've betted on or whatever market or margin they've ever betted on, correct? All the betting companies have complied within every state and national law, and they offer a pre-commitment limit before and during they use the product. An example of this would be putting in place a max deposit that offers the customer, before they sign up and register with the betting company, a max weekly deposit or a max bet. So that, once again, it complies with the... So we'll wrap it up here. Thanks, guys. And once again, you've got Connor, who was for the gambling industry, and we've got
Jake, who was against the betting industry.
All right, guys, thanks for watching.